The email arrived at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, jolting me awake with its automated chime. I'd forgotten to silence my phone again, a habit born from years of being the first person executives called when crisis struck. My hand fumbled across the nightstand, expecting another emergency from Tokyo or London. Another problem only I could solve. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Instead, I found myself staring at a name I hadn't seen in 3 years, Marcus Chen. Subject, quick favor, reference request. The audacity was breathtaking. I sat up in bed, my silk sheets pooling around my waist as I read those 2 words over and over. Quick favor, as if the man who'd walked out of our engagement party hadn't completely upended my life. As if his parting words hadn't echoed in my mind for months afterward. You're married to your career. Diana, I need a partner, not a business associate. Before we dive deeper into this journey of reckoning, I want to thank you for being here. If you're enjoying this story of empowerment and justice, consider subscribing. It's free and helps us continue sharing these powerful narratives. Now let's continue. I didn't open the email. Not yet. Instead, I set my phone down with deliberate care and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse apartment. The city stretched below me, a constellation of lights that never truly slept. Somewhere out there, Marcus had spent his night crafting that email, probably rehearsing the perfect tone of casual familiarity mixed with professional distance. He had no idea who I'd become in those 3 years. No idea what his abandonment had forged. The memory came unbidden, sharp as broken glass. Our engagement party at the Windsor Hotel, 200 guests mingling in their finest attire. I'd been on the phone in the coat check room, managing a crisis with our Singapore office. Just 15 minutes, that's all it had taken. 15 minutes to save a $40 million deal. When I'd returned to the ballroom, champagne glass still full and untouched, Marcus had been gone. His best man, Tyler, had handed me a note scrawled on hotel stationery. I can't do this. You'll never put us first. I deserve better. The humiliation had been exquisite. Guests had whispered behind raised hands as I stood there, engagement ring suddenly heavy on my finger. Trying to decide which was worse, the abandonment or the audience. Now, standing in my apartment worth more than Marcus's entire year's salary, I allowed myself a cold smile. Time to read that email. I poured myself a glass of water, settled into my leather armchair, and opened his message. Hey Diana, I hope this email finds you well. I know it's been a while, and I want to say up front that I hope there are no hard feelings about how things ended between us. We were both young, both figuring out what we wanted, young. We'd been 29. I was now 32 and the Chief Innovation Officer at Meridian Global, one of the fastest-growing tech consultancies in North America. Marcus had been 31 when he'd walked out, old enough to know exactly what he was doing. I'm reaching out because I'm applying for a senior position at Vertex Solutions, and I noticed you're connected to several people on their executive team. I was hoping you might be willing to provide a reference or even just an introduction. The role would be a huge step up for me, and honestly, I think my experience at TechBridge has prepared me well for it. I know I'm asking a lot, but you were always so generous and supportive. That's one of the things I admired most about you. Would you be open to a quick call to discuss? Best Marcus I read it 3 times, each pass revealing new layers of presumption. The casual, no hard feelings, as if he'd simply moved to another city rather than abandoned me at our own engagement party. The subtle manipulation in, you were always so generous, suggesting that refusing would make me petty. The complete absence of any real apology, but it was the company name that made my smile widen. Vertex Solutions. I knew Vertex intimately. I'd consulted for them 2 years ago, helping restructure their entire operations division. The CEO, Patricia Moreland, still sent me a bottle of wine every Christmas. The COO, James Wu, had tried to recruit me 4 times. The VP of Strategy, Samantha Keys, was my former classmate from Wharton. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. More importantly, I knew exactly which senior position Marcus was applying for: Director of Strategic Partnerships. The role reported directly to Samantha, a role I'd been asked to help fill. The irony was so perfect it felt orchestrated by the universe itself. I checked the time. 3:15 a.m. Too early to call anyone, but not too early to plan. I opened my laptop and began pulling files. Within 30 minutes, I had Marcus's LinkedIn profile, his employment history at TechBridge, and through some discreet channels I'd cultivated over the years, a copy of his application to Vertex. His resume was impressive on paper: 5 years at TechBridge, promoted twice, led several successful client engagements. But I noticed what others might miss: the gaps in his project timelines, the vague language around his specific contributions, the way he listed team successes as individual achievements. I'd spent 3 years building not just my career, but a network that stretched across industries. I knew people who knew people. Within that network, truth had a way of surfacing. By 4:30 a.m., I had 3 phone numbers: colleagues of Marcus at TechBridge who might be willing to provide honest assessments of his work. Not glowing recommendations, just honest ones. The kind of honesty that revealed character. But I wasn't ready to make those calls yet. First, I needed to understand the full picture. I needed to know if Marcus had changed, grown, learned anything in 3 years. Or if he was still the man who'd valued his ego over our relationship. I composed my response carefully. "Marcus, what a surprise to hear from you. I'm happy to discuss this. How about coffee tomorrow at 10 a.m.? There's a new place called Meridian Cafe on 5th and Madison. We have a lot to catch up on." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The cafe I'd mentioned wasn't random. It was in the lobby of my company's building. A subtle power play, perhaps, but Marcus had been the one to reach out. He'd set this game in motion. My phone buzzed almost immediately. Apparently, he was awake too. That would be great. "See you then." I set my phone aside and walked to my home office, a converted bedroom that housed my real workspace. Unlike the sleek, minimalist aesthetic of the rest of my apartment, this room was organized chaos: 3 monitors, file cabinets filled with documentation from every project I'd led, and a wall covered in photographs. Not personal photos, professional ones. Every team I'd built, every executive I'd mentored, every company I'd helped transform. In the center, almost hidden among the others, was a single photo from my engagement party. Me in my silver dress, radiant and hopeful, moments before everything shattered. I'd kept it as a reminder. Not of heartbreak, but of the moment I'd learned that some people would always see ambition as a flaw rather than a strength. The next morning arrived with the efficiency of my carefully structured routine. Workout at 6 a.m., shower, a breakfast of Greek yogurt and berries while reviewing overnight emails from international teams. By 8:30, I was in my office at Meridian Global, 3 floors above the cafe where I'd be meeting Marcus. "You're here early," my assistant Rachel said, appearing in my doorway with her tablet already glowing. She was 26, brilliant, and reminded me of myself at that age: hungry, focused, willing to outwork everyone. When am I not? I replied, not looking up from my screen. "Fair point. Your 9 o'clock with the board is confirmed. They want to discuss the acquisition proposal. Ready for it." "What else?" Rachel scrolled through her notes. "Patricia Moreland from Vertex Solutions called. Said it wasn't urgent, but she'd like to talk when you have time. Something about a reference request they received?" There it was. The universe's sense of humor at work again. "Tell her I'll call her this afternoon," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "After 2. Rachel nodded and left, closing the door behind her. I swiveled in my chair to face the windows overlooking the city. From this height, people below looked like pieces on a chessboard. I'd learned to think of business that way, not cold or calculating, but strategic. Every move counted. Every decision rippled outward. Marcus had taught me that, though not in the way he'd intended. His departure had forced me to choose: wallow in the humiliation or weaponize it. I'd chosen the latter. At 9:45, I took the elevator down to the lobby. The Meridian Cafe was designed to impress, all glass and steel, with art pieces that cost more than most people's cars. I'd chosen a table by the window, visible but not too exposed. A power position. Marcus arrived at exactly 10 a.m. I watched him through the cafe windows, pausing outside to check his reflection, straightening his tie. He was wearing a navy suit that looked new, his hair styled with more product than I remembered. He'd grown a beard, neatly trimmed, probably trying to look more mature. When he entered and spotted me, his face broke into a smile that looked practiced. "Diana, wow, you look amazing." I stood, accepting his handshake but not his attempt at a hug. "Marcus, thanks for meeting on short notice." We sat, and a server appeared immediately. I ordered an espresso. Marcus ordered a complicated latte with specifications that took 30 seconds to explain. Some things hadn't changed. "So," he began, leaning back in his chair with affected casualness. "Meridian Global. I saw on LinkedIn that you're CIO now. That's incredible." "I always knew you'd do something big." The compliment rang hollow, but I smiled. "Thank you. It's been a journey." "And you're at TechBridge?" "For now," he said, and there was an edge to his voice. "It's been great, but I'm ready for the next challenge. That's why I'm so excited about this opportunity at Vertex." "Tell me about it," I said, sipping my espresso. "What appeals to you about the role?" He launched into a rehearsed pitch about strategic partnerships, market expansion, and leveraging synergies. All the buzzwords consultants loved. I listened, noting how often he said I versus we, how his examples of success were always positioned with him at the center. When he finished, I leaned forward slightly. "It sounds like you've accomplished a lot at TechBridge. What made you start looking for something new?" He hesitated just for a moment. "Honestly, I feel like I've outgrown the role. My ideas aren't being heard the way they should be. I need an environment that values vision." Translation: he'd hit a ceiling, probably his own making, and you thought of me for a reference because... I let the question hang. "Because you know Vertex," he said, meeting my eyes with what he probably thought was sincerity. "And because despite everything that happened between us, I respect you." "I always have, despite everything," I repeated softly. "You mean like leaving our engagement party without a word?" The practiced smile faltered. "Diana, I handled that badly." "I know I did. But we were in different places. You were so focused on work, and I needed something you couldn't give me." "Couldn't or wouldn't? Does it matter?" He shifted in his seat, his discomfort visible. "I'm not here to rehash the past. I thought enough time had gone by that we could be professional about this." Professional. The word was almost funny coming from him. "You're right," I said, changing my tone to something more businesslike. "Let's keep this professional. Tell me about your biggest success at TechBridge. The project you're most proud of." He brightened, launching into a story about a client engagement that had saved them millions. As he talked, I mentally cross-referenced his story with what I'd learned from my research. The project he was describing had been led by someone else. I'd checked. Marcus had been on the team, certainly, but in a supporting role. "Impressive," I said when he finished, "and your team must have been thrilled with the outcome." "Oh, they were great. Couldn't have done it without them." A deflection. "Interesting. So about Vertex," he said, steering back to his agenda. "I know it's a big ask, but would you be willing to put in a word? Maybe set up an introduction with whoever's heading up the hiring process?" I took my time responding, watching his eagerness grow with each second of silence. "I can certainly make some calls," I said finally. "But I need to be honest about something, Marcus. When I provide a reference, my reputation is on the line. I need to be absolutely certain that I'm vouching for someone who will reflect well on me." "Of course," he said quickly. "Absolutely. I wouldn't ask if I didn't think I was a perfect fit. Then you won't mind if I do my due diligence. I'll need to speak with some of your colleagues at TechBridge, get a fuller picture of your work there." His smile dimmed slightly. "Is that really necessary?" "I can provide references from my managers." "I prefer to do my own research," I interrupted smoothly. "It's how I've built my reputation. Thorough vetting." He couldn't argue without seeming suspicious. "Sure, of course." Whatever you need. We talked for another 15 minutes, surface-level conversation about the industry and market trends. Marcus kept trying to establish rapport, dropping names of mutual acquaintances from our past, laughing at his own jokes. I remained cordial but distant, a perfect mask of professional courtesy. As we stood to leave, he touched my arm lightly. "Diana, I just want to say, I really appreciate this, and I'm sorry for how things ended. You didn't deserve that." It was the first genuine thing he'd said all morning, but it was too little, too late. And something in his eyes told me this apology had more to do with securing the reference than actual remorse. "Thank you for saying that," I replied, extracting my arm gently. "I'll be in touch about Vertex." I watched him leave, his confident stride returning as he exited the cafe. He thought he'd succeeded, thought he'd charmed his way back into my good graces just enough to leverage my connections. Back in my office, I closed the door and sat at my desk for a long moment. Rachel knocked and entered without waiting for permission. Our arrangement for when she sensed something important. "How did it go?" she asked. "Exactly as expected," I said. "Get me Patricia Moreland at Vertex on the phone, and I need you to reach out to these 3 people." I handed her a list of names from TechBridge. "Tell them I'm considering someone for a role and would appreciate their candid assessment. Use your judgment, but make it clear I value honesty over politeness." Rachel glanced at the names, then back at me. "This is about your ex, isn't he? The one you mentioned once." I'd told Rachel about Marcus during a late-night work session months ago, a rare moment of personal sharing. She'd been dealing with her own relationship struggles, and I'd offered the story as cautionary tale. "Yes," I said simply. "And he's about to learn a very important lesson about bridges." "Which is?" I smiled, cold and certain. Never burn one when you don't know who's standing on the other side. The rest of the day unfolded with the precision of a military operation. My call with Patricia Moreland was illuminating. She remembered Marcus's application and admitted they were impressed on paper. But something about his interview had felt off. "He talked a good game," Patricia said. But when we pressed for specifics, he got vague. Samantha had concerns about his team collaboration skills. "That's why we wanted additional references." "And he listed me," I said, which surprised us, frankly. "We knew you two had history. We weren't sure you'd be comfortable providing an honest assessment." "Oh, I'm very comfortable with honesty," I assured her. "Give me a few days to do my research. I'll get back to you with a complete picture." "Diana," Patricia said carefully, "I trust your judgment completely. Whatever you tell me, I'll take seriously." "Good," I replied, "because what I'm going to tell you is going to be very thorough." Rachel's outreach to Marcus's colleagues yielded results within hours. One call back came while I was in my board meeting, and Rachel texted me the summary. Mixed reviews. Talented but difficult. Takes credit, deflects blame. Direct quote. Great at presenting, not great at executing. The other 2 calls came that evening as I was preparing to leave. I took them both in my office, listening carefully as Marcus's former teammates painted a picture of someone who was charismatic and strategic, but fundamentally self-serving. One story particularly stood out. Marcus had presented a junior colleague's proposal as his own, securing a promotion while the actual creator received nothing. By the time I left the office at 7 p.m., I had everything I needed. The real Marcus Chen, stripped of his polished exterior, revealed in the testimony of those who'd worked closest with him. But I wasn't ready to make my move yet. First, I needed to understand something else. What had his life been like these past 3 years? Had he learned anything? Grown at all? I made a call to Tyler, Marcus's best man, and the person who delivered that humiliating note at our engagement party. We'd stayed in touch sporadically. Tyler had apologized profusely for his role in Marcus's departure and had, surprisingly, become something of an ally. "Diana," Tyler answered on the second ring. "This is unexpected. How are you?" "I'm well. I need to ask you about Marcus." A pause. "He's not bothering you, is he?" "He asked me for a job reference." Tyler laughed, a sound of pure disbelief. "You're kidding." That's... wow. That's bold even for him. Tell me about his life since the engagement, I said. Has he changed at all? Tyler sighed. Honestly, no. He dated someone seriously for about a year after you guys split. Broke up with her because, and I quote, she was too needy. Started another relationship last year. Same pattern. He's still looking for someone who'll orbit around him. And work? He tells a good story, but I know for a fact he's on thin ice at TechBridge. He burned bridges with 2 major clients by overpromising and underdelivering. He's desperate for this Vertex job because he needs to jump before he's pushed. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture of someone who'd learned nothing, changed nothing, and was now reaching out to the person he'd wronged because he believed her generous nature would override her memory. He was about to discover how wrong he was. Tyler, I said, would you be willing to provide an honest reference if Vertex contacts you? Another pause, longer this time. He listed me as a reference? No, but he might. Or I might suggest they contact you. Diana, if you're doing what I think you're doing, Tyler's voice held both amusement and concern. Just be careful. Marcus doesn't take rejection well. I remember, I said, thinking of that note. Thanks, Tyler. I hung up and stood at my window again, watching the city lights flicker on as darkness fell. Somewhere out there, Marcus was probably celebrating, thinking his charm had worked, that the reference was as good as secured. Tomorrow, I would begin my due diligence report for Vertex. A comprehensive, thoroughly documented assessment of Marcus Chen's professional capabilities, work ethic, and character. Every word would be true, every claim supported by evidence, every concern backed by testimony. I wouldn't destroy him out of spite. I didn't need to. The truth would do that work for me. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Thanks again for meeting today. I really think this could be a great opportunity. I'll make you proud. I didn't respond. There would be time for words later, when Patricia asked for my recommendation. When Samantha reviewed my findings. When Marcus realized that the woman he'd dismissed as too career-focused had become exactly the kind of focus that ensured accountability. The moon rose over the city, and I stayed at my window, planning. Not revenge. That was too crude a word for what I had in mind. This was justice. The professional kind, delivered with precision and supported by facts. Marcus had said I'd never put us first. He'd been right in a way. I'd put my integrity first, my work first, my future first. And in doing so, I'd built something he could only dream of. Real power, real influence, real respect. Now he wanted to borrow that power, use my influence, trade on my respect. All without ever acknowledging the pain he'd caused or the lesson he should have learned. But lessons delayed are not lessons forgotten. They're just lessons that accumulate interest, and Marcus's bill was about to come due. The next 72 hours were a masterclass in strategic information gathering. I approached Marcus's reference request the same way I approached any critical business decision, with methodical precision and an unwavering commitment to truth. Wednesday morning began with a call from Samantha Keyes at Vertex. We'd maintained our friendship since Wharton, meeting quarterly for lunch and trading industry insights. Her voice carried a mixture of curiosity and caution when she called. Diana, I need to ask you something delicate, she began after our usual pleasantries. Marcus Chen listed you as a reference. Patricia mentioned you two have history. We were engaged, I said simply. He ended it 3 years ago. The silence on the other end lasted several beats. And he had the audacity to ask you for a reference? He did. We met for coffee yesterday. What did you tell him? I swiveled in my chair, watching the morning sun paint geometric patterns across my office floor. I told him I'd do my due diligence. Which I am. Diana. Samantha's voice softened. You don't owe him anything. If this is uncomfortable. It's not uncomfortable, I interrupted gently. It's clarifying. Sam, how important is integrity to you in this role? Critical. The Director of Strategic Partnerships will be the face of our company to major clients. Any misrepresentation could cost us millions. Then you'll want to hear what I've learned. Over the next 20 minutes, I walked Samantha through my findings. Not with emotion or vindictiveness, but with the clinical precision of a consultant presenting data. I shared the testimonies from Marcus's colleagues, the pattern of taking credit for others' work, the gaps between his claims and reality. I have documentation, I added. Emails, project records, timeline discrepancies. Everything is verifiable. Samantha exhaled slowly. This is not what his resume suggested. Resumes rarely tell the whole story. That's why references matter. Is this about what happened between you two? The question was direct, the kind of honesty our friendship allowed. I considered it carefully. 3 years ago, I would have said yes. Today? No. This is about making sure you have accurate information to make the best decision for Vertex. If Marcus were genuinely qualified and had grown from our experience, I'd tell you that too. But he hasn't. Send me everything, Samantha said. And Diana? Thank you. I know this can't be easy. After we hung up, I sat quietly for a moment. Samantha was wrong about one thing. It was easy. Not because I was heartless, but because I'd learned to separate personal feelings from professional responsibility. Marcus had taught me that, ironically, by failing to do it himself. Rachel appeared in my doorway holding a thick folder. The complete Marcus Chen file as requested. I also found something interesting. She laid the folder on my desk and opened to a marked page. He's been posting on LinkedIn about career growth and authenticity. This one from last week is particularly rich. I read the post she'd highlighted. Reflection. True success comes from being authentic and building genuine relationships. Don't burn bridges. You never know when you'll need to cross them again. Grateful for all the people who've shaped my journey. Leadership, career growth, authenticity. The hypocrisy was almost impressive. Marcus preaching about not burning bridges while having torched ours spectacularly, posting about authenticity while fabricating his accomplishments. Screenshot this, I told Rachel, and check if he's posted similar content. I want a pattern documented. By Thursday afternoon, I had compiled a comprehensive report. 15 pages, single-spaced, with appendices containing supporting documentation. It read like a case study in inflated credentials and selective truth-telling. Every claim Marcus had made in his application was fact-checked against reality. Every accomplishment was traced to its actual source. The report wasn't cruel. It was thorough. I highlighted his genuine strengths. He was articulate, presentable, good at initial client impressions. But I also documented his critical weaknesses: inability to execute, tendency to claim team victories as personal achievements, pattern of burning out relationships with colleagues when he no longer needed them. In the executive summary, I wrote, Marcus Chen presents well and possesses certain tactical skills that can be valuable in client-facing roles. However, his pattern of misrepresenting his contributions, combined with documented instances of taking credit for others' work, raises serious concerns about his suitability for a senior leadership position requiring integrity and team collaboration. His interpersonal relationships tend to be transactional, valued only insofar as they serve his immediate career advancement. This is not speculation. It is a pattern verified by multiple sources across different time periods. I sent the report to Samantha with a cover note. As requested, my complete assessment. All claims are documented and verifiable. Happy to discuss any questions. Then I waited. Marcus texted me Thursday evening. Hey, just checking in. Any update on that reference? Vertex wants to move quickly on this. I stared at the message for a long moment before responding. These things take time. Want to make sure I'm thorough. His reply was immediate. Of course. I really appreciate you taking this seriously. The irony made me smile. He had no idea how seriously I was taking it. Friday morning brought a conference call with Patricia Moreland, Samantha Keys, and James Wu from Vertex. They'd reviewed my report overnight. Diana, Patricia began, her voice grave, this is remarkably detailed work. You've essentially done our entire vetting process for us. I believe in being thorough, James spoke next, his tone carefully neutral. Some of these claims are quite serious. The Hutchinson account situation, for example, where he allegedly presented a junior analyst's strategy as his own. I have the analyst's original presentation, timestamped and backed up on company servers, I said. Along with Marcus's version presented 2 weeks later, identical in all but attribution. The analyst, Rebecca Park, left TechBridge 6 months later. She's now thriving at a competitor, by the way. I spoke with her yesterday, and she confirmed the story? Samantha asked. She did, reluctantly. She's moved on and doesn't want to seem bitter. But when I explained that someone else might suffer the same experience if we don't document patterns of behavior, she agreed to provide a statement. There was a pause. I could almost hear the wheels turning in their minds, weighing legal exposure, cultural fit, and the risk of bringing someone toxic into their organization. The personal history between you and Marcus, Patricia said carefully. How much is that influencing this assessment? It was a fair question, and I'd prepared for it. If anything, it made me more careful to stick to verifiable facts. Everything in that report can be independently confirmed. I'm not speculating about his character. I'm documenting his pattern of professional behavior. The fact that he also ended our engagement poorly is relevant only insofar as it demonstrates consistency. When relationships no longer serve him, he discards them without regard for the other person. He left you at your engagement party, James said quietly. It wasn't a question, he did. But that's personal. What's professional is that he asked the woman he publicly humiliated for a reference, apparently believing either that I'd forgotten or that I'd be too generous, his word, to let it affect my recommendation. That judgment call tells you something about how he assesses people and situations. Another pause. Longer this time. Diana, Samantha said, we're going to pass on Marcus. This report makes it clear he's not the right fit. But I want to ask, would you be willing to consult on filling this position? You clearly understand what we need, and you've demonstrated the kind of thoroughness we value. I hadn't expected that. I'd be happy to help. Good. We'll have our recruiter reach out. And Diana? I'm sorry about what happened with your engagement. For what it's worth, his loss was clearly our industry's gain. After the call ended, I sat back in my chair, processing the moment. Vertex had made their decision. Marcus wouldn't be getting the job. But more than that, they'd seen the value in my approach, not vindictive, just uncompromisingly honest. The next move was delicate. Marcus deserved to know the decision, but not necessarily all the reasons why. That would come from Vertex in their own way, in their own time. I was drafting a carefully worded message when my office door burst open. Rachel stood there, her face flushed with urgency. Diana, you need to see this. She held out her tablet. On the screen was a LinkedIn post from Marcus published 15 minutes ago. Excited to announce that I'm in final rounds for a director position at a major firm. Big things coming. Grateful to all my supporters who've vouched for me along the way. Special thanks to those who've put aside personal differences to support professional growth. That's what real leadership looks like. Career moves. Leadership, censure, gratitude. The presumption was staggering. He was already claiming victory, already positioning himself as magnanimous for allowing me to help him, already crafting a narrative where he was the gracious party and I was the one who'd put aside personal differences. He doesn't know yet, Rachel said. Vertex hasn't told him. I read the post again, noting the engagement. 37 likes already, a dozen congratulatory comments. Marcus was building momentum, creating a public expectation of success. The fall would be harder from that height. Leave it, I said, handing the tablet back. Let him have this moment. Rachel looked at me with concern. Diana, he's basically taking credit for your support when you're the reason he won't get the job. I know. But correcting him publicly would make me look petty. Better to let Vertex handle this professionally. What I didn't tell Rachel was that Marcus's post had just handed me an unexpected gift. By publicly thanking me before receiving an offer, he'd created evidence of our interaction. If he tried to later claim I'd sabotaged him out of revenge, this post proved he'd believed my help was genuine. His own words would contradict any accusation of bias. Sometimes the best chess moves are the ones your opponent makes for you. The weekend passed slowly. I kept my phone close, waiting for the inevitable explosion. Vertex had told me they'd inform Marcus of their decision Monday morning. I imagined him spending the weekend celebrating, perhaps shopping for new suits, maybe even giving notice at TechBridge. The crash was going to be spectacular. Monday morning. I arrived at my office to find an urgent message from Tyler. "Call me when you can." "It's about Marcus." I dialed immediately. Tyler answered on the first ring, his voice tight with barely suppressed laughter. "He knows," Tyler said. "Vertex called him an hour ago." "Diana, he's losing his mind." "What happened?" "They told him they were going in a different direction." Very professional, very brief. "He called me right after, furious." "He's convinced you sabotaged him." "Based on what evidence?" "None. That's what makes it perfect." "He can't prove anything because they cited cultural fit concerns and verification discrepancies in his application." "Nothing directly pointing to you, but he knows." "He knows because he understands, probably for the first time, that actions have consequences." I leaned back in my chair, processing this. "How bad is it?" "He's talking about calling you, demanding to know what you told them." I advised against it, but he's not listening. He's also considering removing that LinkedIn post, but it's too late. People have already seen it and commented. The narrative he built is now working against him. "Keep me updated," I said. "And Tyler? Thank you for being honest with him when he needed to hear it." "He didn't hear it," Tyler said. "That's the problem. He heard what he wanted to hear, believed what was convenient to believe. Some people never learn, Diana. Marcus is one of them." The call from Marcus came at 2:17 p.m. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message with Rachel present. "Wanting a witness." Marcus's voice was controlled but strained. "Diana, it's Marcus. I just heard from Vertex. They're passing on me, and I need to know what you told them." "You said you'd help? You said you'd do your due diligence. I need you to call me back immediately. This is important, no please." No acknowledgement that I'd done exactly what I'd promised. Due diligence. Just demand an entitlement. I didn't call back. Instead, I sent a carefully crafted email. "Marcus, I received your voicemail. As I mentioned when we met, I conducted thorough due diligence before providing my assessment to Vertex. That process included speaking with your colleagues, reviewing your project history, and verifying the accuracy of your stated accomplishments. My recommendation was based entirely on professional considerations and documented evidence. I provided Vertex with an honest, comprehensive evaluation. That's what due diligence means. If the outcome wasn't what you hoped for, I'd suggest reflecting on the feedback and using it for future growth. I wish you well in your career search." Diana, I copied Samantha on the email, creating a paper trail. If Marcus tried to claim I'd acted unprofessionally, this exchange would prove otherwise. His response came within minutes, all pretense of courtesy abandoned. "Honest evaluation? You sabotaged me because you're still bitter about the engagement. This is revenge, pure and simple. I never thought you'd be this petty, Diana. You've always preached about professionalism, but when it counted, you let personal feelings override everything. I hope it was worth it." I read it twice, then forwarded it to Samantha and Patricia without comment. The email spoke for itself. His lack of accountability, his immediate jump to blame, his inability to consider that perhaps, just perhaps, his own actions had consequences. Samantha's response was swift. "Well, this confirms our decision." "Sorry you're dealing with this," Patricia added. "I'm forwarding this to our legal team. If he continues, we'll send a cease and desist." No one threatens people who help us make informed decisions, but Marcus wasn't done. Over the next 2 days, he embarked on what could only be described as a digital tantrum. He removed the LinkedIn post about his final rounds, but not before dozens of people had seen it. He posted a vague message about learning who your real friends are and people who smile to your face while stabbing you in the back. Several mutual connections reached out to me, asking what had happened. I responded uniformly, I provided a professional reference based on factual assessment. I can't comment further. Tyler reported that Marcus was planning to file a complaint with my company, claiming I'd used my position improperly. I forwarded all documentation to Meridian Global's legal department, along with a comprehensive timeline. They reviewed everything and concluded within hours that I'd acted entirely appropriately. If anything, our general counsel told me, you were more thorough and fair than required. Most people would have simply declined to provide a reference. But the most revealing moment came on Wednesday, when Rebecca Park, the junior analyst whose work Marcus had stolen, reached out directly. Diana, I heard what happened with Marcus and Vertex. I wanted to thank you. When you called last week, I almost didn't tell you the truth about what he did. I thought it would make me look weak or vindictive, but you helped me see that silence protects people like Marcus and hurts everyone else. He just called me, by the way, asking if I'd spoken to you. I told him the truth, that yes, I had, and that I'd do it again. He hung up on me. I read her message twice, feeling something shift inside me. This had stopped being about Marcus and me somewhere along the way. It had become about accountability, about ensuring that talented people like Rebecca weren't crushed by those who valued advancement over integrity. I replied, "Thank you for your courage, Rebecca. How are things at your new company?" Her response, "Amazing. I'm leading projects, getting recognition, and working with people who value collaboration. Leaving TechBridge was the best decision I ever made. Your call reminded me why I made it. Thursday brought an unexpected development. James Wu from Vertex called with a proposal. Diana, we've been discussing internally, and we'd like to offer you the Director of Strategic Partnerships role." I was genuinely surprised. "James, I'm flattered, but I'm not looking to leave Meridian. Hear me out. We're not asking you to leave. We're proposing a hybrid arrangement. You'd consult with us part-time while maintaining your position at Meridian. Patricia's already spoken to your CEO. They're open to it if you are." I considered this carefully. Vertex was a major player, and the role Marcus had wanted was actually beneath my current level. But a consulting partnership? That was intriguing. What's the scope? Help us build the Strategic Partnerships division from the ground up. Your thoroughness in vetting Marcus showed us what we've been missing, not just in hiring, but in our entire approach to partnerships. We need someone who sees the whole picture, who doesn't just look at surface credentials. We talked for another 30 minutes, exploring possibilities. By the end of the call, we'd outlined a 6-month consulting contract that would give me equity in Vertex, while allowing me to maintain my role at Meridian. Marcus had inadvertently opened a door for me, though not the way he'd intended. Friday afternoon, exactly 1 week after our coffee meeting, I received a final email from Marcus. This one was different, shorter, colder, final. "I hope you're happy with what you've done. You had a chance to be the bigger person, to show real leadership. Instead, you proved that you're exactly what I always thought. Someone who puts career over people. Goodbye, Diana." I read it once, then archived it without responding. There was nothing more to say. Marcus had spent a week trying different approaches: charm, anger, guilt, accusation. And none had changed the fundamental truth. His career struggles were his own making. But his final words lingered. Someone who puts career over people. That night, alone in my apartment, I pulled out the old photograph from my engagement party. The woman in that picture had believed that love required compromise, that ambition needed apology, that success made you selfish. 3 years had taught me differently. I hadn't put career over people. I'd put integrity over convenience. I'd chosen honesty over comfort. And in doing so, I'd protected not just Vertex, but everyone who might have worked under Marcus's toxic leadership. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Samantha Keys just posted about integrity and hiring practices. She didn't name names, but the timing is interesting. Also, the Vertex contract paperwork is ready for your review. I smiled, setting the engagement photo aside. Monday, I'd sign the Vertex contract. Tuesday, I had 3 meetings about Meridian's expansion into Asian markets. Wednesday, I was keynoting a conference on ethical leadership. Marcus was right about one thing. I had made a choice. But it wasn't between career and people. It was between who I'd been, apologetic, accommodating, afraid of taking up space, and who I'd become. The woman who'd stood in that coat room 3 years ago, apologizing for taking a 15-minute call to save a $40 million deal, wouldn't recognize me now. That was exactly the point. 3 months after signing the Vertex consulting contract, I found myself standing in front of 200 executives at the National Leadership Summit. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was delivering the keynote on ethical leadership in the age of personal branding. Behind me, a slide displayed a quote I'd chosen carefully. "Integrity is what you do when no one is watching. Character is what you do when everyone is." I didn't mention Marcus by name. I didn't need to. The case study I presented, of a leader who fabricated accomplishments, stole credit, and ultimately destroyed their own career through dishonesty, was universal enough that everyone in the room could see themselves or someone they knew. What I didn't expect was to see Marcus himself, sitting in the back row. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second. He looked different, older, harder, wearing a suit that had seen better days. The beard was gone, replaced by the clean-shaven look of someone trying to present a fresh start. He held my gaze for a moment, then looked away. I continued my presentation without missing a beat, though my mind was racing. Why was he here? This was an invitation-only event, tickets running $5,000. Had he crashed it? Or worse, was he actually working for one of the attending companies? After my talk, during the networking reception, I learned the answer. Marcus had registered under TechBridge's corporate account, using his old employee credentials that apparently hadn't been fully deactivated. Security was already being notified, but he'd slipped away before they could escort him out. "He's been doing this at several industry events," Tyler told me later that evening. We were having dinner at a restaurant downtown, catching up properly for the first time in months. Networking desperately, handing out resumes, trying to rebuild. "It's not going well. How not well?" I asked, though part of me already knew. Tyler swirled his wine, considering his words. "Diana, you need to understand something. What you did, the reference, the documentation, it wasn't the beginning of his downfall. It was the revelation of it. Marcus had been coasting on charm and theft for years. You just happened to be the first person who bothered to look beneath the surface. That doesn't make me feel better about it." "It should," Tyler said firmly. "After Vertex passed on him, word got around. Not because you spread rumors, because other people started doing their own diligence. Companies he'd worked with before began reviewing his actual contributions. TechBridge launched an internal investigation into several of his projects. What they found," he paused. "Let's just say he's lucky they agreed to let him resign instead of firing him." I set down my fork, appetite fading. I never wanted to destroy him, Tyler. I just wanted the truth to matter. And it does. But here's what you need to hear. You're not responsible for the consequences of his choices. He built his career on sand. The tide was always going to come in eventually. You were just the first wave. The metaphor stuck with me through the following weeks. As my consulting work with Vertex expanded and my role at Meridian grew more strategic, I kept encountering the ripples of that initial decision. Not just with Marcus, but with others who'd heard the story through the industry grapevine. Rebecca Park reached out again, this time with news. She'd been promoted to senior analyst at her new firm, and she was implementing a mentorship program specifically designed to protect junior employees from credit theft. "I'm calling it the Transparency Initiative," she told me over coffee. "Every project has documented contributions from every team member. No more mystery about who did what. Your reference call gave me the courage to speak up, and now I'm using my voice to change systems." That's when I realized something crucial. This had never been about revenge. Revenge would have meant destroying Marcus for personal satisfaction. What I'd done was different. I'd held someone accountable for their pattern of behavior, and in doing so, I'd inadvertently protected others and inspired change. The 4th month brought an unexpected encounter. I was leaving a client meeting at a downtown office building when I literally bumped into Marcus in the lobby. He'd aged more than 3 months should allow, stress etched in the lines around his eyes, shoulders curved inward in a way I'd never seen during our relationship. "Diana," he said, and there was no anger in his voice, just exhaustion. "Marcus." We stood there awkwardly, people flowing around us like water around stones. Finally, he spoke again. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm interviewing for a position. Junior consultant role. He laughed bitterly. "It's about 4 levels below where I was." "How's the interview going?" He shrugged. "Honestly, I don't know. They asked me detailed questions about my actual work product. Wanted specifics, examples, proof of individual contribution. I gave them what I could, but after years of taking credit for teamwork, it's hard to remember what I actually did myself. There was something different about him, a resignation, maybe, or the beginning of self-awareness. I waited, sensing he had more to say. "I've had a lot of time to think," Marcus continued, looking past me at the busy lobby. "About what you said in that email. About reflection and growth. I was so angry at first, convinced you'd sabotaged me out of spite. But the more I looked for evidence of that, the more I found evidence of exactly what you documented." "Marcus." "Let me finish," he interrupted gently. "Please, I need to say this while I have the courage." He took a breath. "You were right. About all of it. The credit stealing, the misrepresentations, the way I treated people as stepping stones. And the engagement." His voice cracked slightly. "I blamed you for being too focused on your career because it was easier than admitting I was jealous, intimidated. You were going places, and deep down I knew I was stagnating. So I left before you could figure that out." I felt something shift inside my chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but a loosening of tension I'd carried for 3 years. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because you deserved better than that note at the engagement party. You deserved an explanation, an apology, basic human decency. And because," he met my eyes fully for the first time, "because I want you to know that what you did, the reference, the honesty, it was the kindest thing anyone's done for me in years." I must have looked skeptical because he laughed again. More genuinely this time, "I'm serious. Everyone else just enabled me, let me continue destroying my own career slowly. You ripped the Band-Aid off, forced me to see what I'd become. It's been hell, Diana. I won't pretend otherwise. But for the first time in my life, I'm actually looking at who I am instead of who I pretend to be." "What will you do?" I asked. "If you don't get this job?" "Keep trying. Rebuild from the ground up, this time honestly. Maybe take some time to actually develop skills instead of just claiming I have them." He glanced at his watch. "I should go. Interviews in 10 minutes? But Diana, thank you for being the only person who cared enough to be honest." He walked toward the elevators and I watched him go, processing the encounter. This wasn't the vindictive satisfaction I'd imagined revenge might bring. It was something more complex, a recognition that people could change, that accountability could lead to growth, that sometimes the hardest truths were the most necessary. I pulled out my phone and called Samantha. "Sam, quick question. What company is in this building? I just ran into Marcus in the lobby and he mentioned interviewing here." "That's Sterling Dynamics." "Good firm, why?" He said it's for a junior consultant role. "They're doing thorough vetting." There was a pause. "Diana, if you're asking if we should intervene—" "I'm not," I said quickly. "I'm asking if you know anyone there who might value an honest assessment of someone who's genuinely trying to rebuild." Another pause. Longer. "You're suggesting we help him?" "I'm suggesting we let him succeed or fail on his actual merits. If he's really changing, he deserves a fair shot. If he's not, they'll figure it out. But I don't want my reference from 3 months ago to haunt him forever if he's genuinely doing the work to improve." Samantha was quiet for a moment. "You're a better person than I am, Diana Chen. I'm just trying to be fair. There's a difference between accountability and persecution." That evening, I sat in my apartment with a glass of wine and my laptop, reviewing the Vertex quarterly reports. The strategic partnerships division I'd helped build was exceeding projections. The cultural changes Patricia and Samantha had implemented based on our experience with Marcus were creating ripples throughout the organization. But more than that, I'd received 17 emails in the past month from people I'd never met, junior analysts, mid-level managers, even a few executives, thanking me for my conference talk, for giving them the courage to document their contributions, to speak up when credit was misallocated, to demand accountability. One email in particular stood out, from a woman named Jennifer Martinez. I watched your keynote 3 times. I've been dealing with a supervisor who takes credit for my work, and I was ready to quit. Instead, I documented everything, requested a meeting with HR, and presented my case professionally. They investigated and found a pattern. I wasn't the first. He's been placed on probation, and I've been reassigned to a new team. But more importantly, I found my voice. Thank you for showing me that integrity isn't about being liked. It's about being honest. I read that email until I'd memorized it, because it crystallized something I'd been struggling to articulate. The Marcus situation had never been about punishment. It had been about creating a world where people like Jennifer didn't have to choose between their careers and their integrity. 2 weeks later, I received a LinkedIn message from Marcus. I almost deleted it without reading, but curiosity won. Diana, I wanted you to know, I got the Sterling Dynamics position. Junior consultant, exactly what I interviewed for. They told me they did extensive background checks and spoke with several of my former colleagues. They know everything about my past, and they hired me anyway because I was honest about it in the interview. I told them about the credit stealing, about you, about how I'm trying to rebuild with integrity this time. They appreciated the transparency. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that your honesty set me on a path I should have been on years ago. I'm starting over, and for the first time, I'm building something real. I hope you're well. You deserve every success you've achieved, Marcus. I read it twice, then closed the message without responding. Some things didn't need a reply. Some chapters closed themselves. 6 months after that coffee meeting that had started everything, I stood at another window, this time in Vertex Solutions' new headquarters. Patricia had just announced my appointment to their advisory board, making me the youngest member in the company's history. Speech, someone called out, and the room full of executives turned to me expectantly. I kept it brief. 3 years ago, someone told me I was too career-focused, as if ambition was a character flaw. Today, I'm grateful for that assessment, because it forced me to examine what I really valued. Not career over people, but integrity over convenience. Not success over relationships, but honesty over comfort. The best thing we can do for each other is tell the truth, even when it's hard, even when it costs us something. That's what real leadership looks like. The applause was generous, but more importantly, it was genuine. These people weren't celebrating my revenge on an ex-fiancé. They were celebrating the culture we'd built together, one where truth mattered, where documentation protected people, where accountability wasn't punishment, but foundation. That night, I finally removed the engagement party photo from my office wall. Not because I'd forgotten, but because I no longer needed the reminder. I'd learned the lesson. I'd become the person that experience was meant to forge. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Tyler just posted about integrity in relationships. Did something happen? I checked Tyler's post. Lesson learned. The people who challenge us the most often teach us the most. Real friends tell you the truth even when it hurts. Real leaders create accountability even when it's uncomfortable. Grateful for the truth tellers in my life. He'd tagged me. I liked the post, then set my phone down. Outside my window, the city glowed with possibility, and somewhere in that vast landscape, Marcus was rebuilding, Rebecca was leading, Jennifer was thriving, and countless others were finding their voices. The best revenge, I'd learned, wasn't destruction. It was transformation, not just of yourself, but of the systems that enabled harm in the first place. Marcus had asked me for a job reference thinking he was calling in a favor. Instead, he'd triggered a reckoning. Not just for him, but for an entire industry that had grown comfortable with convenient lies. 3 years ago, I'd been left standing at an engagement party, humiliated and heartbroken. Today, I stood at the pinnacle of my career, surrounded by people who valued truth over comfort, growth over convenience, integrity over expedience. Marcus had been right about one thing. I was too career-focused. I was focused on building a career that meant something. One where honesty wasn't a liability but a strength, where accountability protected the vulnerable instead of punishing them, where success was measured not just in promotions and partnerships, but in the positive change you created along the way. As I closed my laptop and prepared to leave the office, I thought about that 2:47 a.m. email that had started everything. Marcus had reached out hoping to leverage my generosity. Instead, he'd discovered my integrity, and in the end, that had made all the difference, not just for him, but for everyone his story had touched. The engagement ring I'd once worn was long since sold. The proceeds donated to a nonprofit supporting women in technology. The hurt had faded into wisdom. The anger had transformed into purpose. I wasn't the woman Marcus had left. I was the woman his leaving had revealed, stronger, clearer, uncompromising in the best possible way. And that, I realized as I stepped into the elevator heading down, was the real victory. Not that he'd fallen, but that I'd risen. Not that he'd been punished, but that I'd been freed. The doors closed, and I caught my reflection in the polished steel, confident, composed, complete, too career-focused? Perhaps, but I'd built that career on truth. And truth, unlike charm or manipulation or stolen credit, was a foundation that lasted. The elevator descended, and I smiled. This chapter was finally completely closed, and the next one? The next one was mine to write. The end. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.